Well, welcome everyone to BESydney's Anticipating Tomorrow Global Insights webinar series. This webinar is the first in our leadership series, and I'm really pleased that my first 20-minute conversation is with Tracy Halliwell MBE. Now, Tracy is the Director of Tourism Conventions and Major Events at London & Partners. And London & Partners is London's international trade, investment and promotion agency. So welcome, Tracy.
Thanks, Lynn. Nice to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on this webinar, the first of our leadership series. I'm sure you'll agree that when 2020 started out, we never anticipated anything for our industry, our tourism, major events, business events industry, absolutely, down to its knees. And for many of us, it's not coming out anytime soon, so we've got a long way to go. I want to talk about London & Partners because you're quite a unique model. Most of the destination marketing organisations in the world are either not-for-profit sitting outside of government, and then there's some that are government agencies. You're a true integration with your economic development. So I'm really keen for you to just describe how you're structured and what are the benefits of that structure that you enjoy.
I suppose you'd call us a public-private organisation in that 50% of our funding comes from the Mayor of London. We are publicly funded from that perspective. But then 50% of our funding comes from private sector. So whether that's membership or partnership schemes or sponsors or just paid for activity or commercial revenue through our website. So that means that we have this arm's length deal from government, I suppose, which means we're not a toy of government. We work on behalf of our partners, but we're funded and we have a responsibility to the local authority. And that works very well because if you're the official agency of the mayor, it does breed that confidence in who you are and what you can do, which is really vitally important. The other difference with us is, as you said, it's this economic development organisation. So we not only do tourism, both Convention Bureau and leisure tourism, we also attract students, so foreign overseas students, to come and study in London.
Well, there's a big impact there, isn't there? We might come back to that.
Well, yeah, and 114,000 students in London every year is a big part of our economy. Who also, interestingly, all of their parents and family and friends that come to visit them are also tourists.
Yep.
So there is this circular effect to everything we do. There's another team which is around foreign direct investment. So that's how do we attract foreign overseas companies to come and put their European headquarters into London. And that, in turn, they also generate tourism and leisure and meeting spend off the back of what they do. And then we have two other smaller programs. One is around how do we help some of those SMEs that have come to London, how do we help them to grow? Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, how do we help UK-based companies or London-based companies to export overseas? Yeah. So we've got this whole end-to-end business going on. And the great thing about that is we're growing our own tourist and business visitors of the future. Yeah. As we're attracting them in at the student level, we're then helping them to set up businesses and grow, and they become meetings of the future and leisure visitors of the future. So all of that adds into this whole animating a city, and the more is going on in your city, the more it attracts, across the board.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was about London, and this may not refer to London as much as other cities like Sydney, but, this working from home, and I say we're actually at home working, but the flexibility that employers are going to give from here on in, I think is people are still very hesitant to get on public transport. And so I think employers are going to have to be flexible with their workforce. What does that mean for cities? When you look at your business district, and it's not as vibrant, like I could throw a stone down our main street. There's hardly anyone there a few months ago. It's starting to become a little bit more vibrant now because we've had a summit. We've looked at ways that we can really, get the economy back up with the nighttime economy in terms of al fresco dining coming into summer and bands and music again, which we haven't had for quite some time. But it does concern me that we're not going to have that workforce back in our cities and what that might mean for not only the local but the visitor when they do return. You any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've done a lot of thinking around. When we first locked down back in March, the Mayor actually introduced a scheme, a pay it forward scheme. So the idea was around actually buying things in advance when the city was open again. So whether that was your cup of coffee from your local shop or your manicure from or your haircut, and it was trying to bank ahead for people coming back and doing all this stuff. We've also done a study around actually the impact of the commuter is not as big as we thought it was when you compare it to the impact of the tourist. Not having tourists in central London is way 10, 20 times bigger than the impact of not having commuters.
Absolutely.
So, we need to concentrate on where it's going to be a problem. We also launched a campaign which was called Because I'm a Londoner, and that was literally around instilling that confidence back into Londoners to come back into town. So we ran a whole series of activity. It was an open campaign, anybody could join in. We just created a load of assets for them. But it was around, I love my local, hat shop because I'm a Londoner, and this is where I go to buy my hat from. I love my local artisan coffee shop. And we were doing a whole bit about getting people back out and walking around London. People, yes, they are nervous of public transport, but there's lots of other ways to get around. So whether that's, the introduction of electric scooters now, many more opportunities to do that kind of fun stuff, opening up the cycle paths. We've done a lot of work around closing roads, making outdoor dining. So the infrastructure, we've changed a little bit the way London perhaps operates. There's also another campaign around 15-minute cities, which is it's more about the local communities, but with people now working from home much more, they want to be within 15 minutes of their home. So it's about regenerating local high streets. But London obviously is a city composed of 30, 40 different mini cities, if you like, 34 different boroughs. So it's how are we working with those boroughs to make sure those high streets are vibrant and buzzing. And even in central London, a lot of people live in central London. So it's a bit of a jigsaw. It's how do you get it right that you keep this donut effect around London, in effect, busy, but you don't lose the heart and soul of the city. I think the other thing that we'll perhaps morph more into, because this has come out in a lot of our customer sentiment research, is that people like the idea of the museums and galleries not being so busy, of them being able to walk through Covent Garden and not be jostled by, hundreds of tourists.
Absolutely.
Now is the time to go and explore your own city. So I think that's kind of where we'll be pushing, with the view that as soon as airlines and quarantine and testing and all that is open, we're ready for them. But you're right. I've also seen some really interesting things around hotels, and you might be seeing this in Sydney too, but hotels were converting bedrooms into working spaces. So,
no, I haven't heard that one.
Exactly. So if you're bored of working from home, go and rent a hotel room for the day and actually use the facilities in the hotel.
What a great idea. I mean, ours is sitting at 30% occupancy. That's amazing.
Exactly. So hotels are coming up with specific packages, and, for the higher end, rent a suite, then you can have people come to you and meet with you. You can have all your teas and coffees and dining. You can use the spa. You can have a drink in the bar, and then you go home at the end of the day. So there's a bit of that going on. So, and this is where I come back to, the market is resilient and it's creative and it will find a way. All of the office space that will remain unoccupied, they'll find creative ways of using that space. And actually, there may be an opportunity for us, because some of that high street space that may not be being used, we could use that as meeting space.
Absolutely. Creative spaces open up that haven't been offered to clients before. I totally agree. Yeah.
And actually, that's another thing, with the creatives, a lot of big cities, the creatives as artists, studio space, designers find it quite difficult to have space in big cities because it's too expensive. Hopefully that now could open up so that we get much more of that, the younger, creatives back into city centres, so that and that adds to the mix of what makes a city great. So I think it's going to be a bit of a leveller, and it's going to give us the opportunity to recreate our central zones. So they're not these elite tourist business focuses. You know, they are much more open.
I think that there's so many similarities between London and Sydney, and I love all those ideas. I know we're thinking them through at the moment. We've got the 20-minute city, and, you know, everyone is living in their neighbourhoods and getting to know their community, which is really, really wonderful. And then the city, trying to work at ways how we stimulate the retail and the restaurants coming into this summer, Christmas period, because you know, you've already been open. We haven't sort of been there yet. We're just coming into that, and we'll be very vigilant. I have no doubt. But there's some great ideas there. Thanks for sharing. What about, you mentioned clients and stakeholders. If we just go to the business events industry at this point in time, you know that nearly 60% of the international associations are based in Europe, and they're making decisions on where they host their events around the world. I mean, a significant impact on them and how technology and the virtual environment has been thrust upon them, and how they monetize that and keep their membership. There's, you know, the challenge of their global meeting is a big revenue raiser for them on an annual, biannual basis. What are you hearing across those international associations? What are they thinking is going to happen in the next 12, 24 months to them, their business and their events? I
think some of the more sophisticated ones are realising the opportunity of virtual and hybrid events. So, you know, the data they can collect from running a virtual event is phenomenal. They know, you know, who's coming, who's going to which sessions are the most popular, where people are going on the onward journey from that. They're realising that you can widen your reach. So instead of having maybe 5,000 people come to your event, you're probably reaching 10, 15,000.
Yeah.
So they're being able to open up their events to a much wider group of people that would never have come before. So people, you know, with disabilities, with children, with, you know, so they're opening up markets. I think that's been good for them. I think they are finding ways of attracting funding and sponsorship that they would have done, you know, in the real world. So unfortunately for us, I think they are embracing it and it's working not too bad. However, I think we're still going to come back to this, you know, you need to have face-to-face contact. I think it'll be very difficult for the networking to ever work virtually. And there's been some clever stuff and companies are coming out with some interesting ways of doing that, but it's going to wear quite thin. So we are going to want to get back to hybrid. And what we're seeing now is a trend of, well, some associations have stayed virtual. And, you know, probably for the next 12, 18 months, we won't see many live association events. There are certainly a few that are desperate to get back into, you know, the live space. So they'll start with hybrids and you know, they'll go from there. So I think hybrid is part of our future. I don't think we'll get away from that now. I
totally agree with you. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
And I think we need to reposition ourselves as hybrid hub capitals. You know, so
this is the interesting next step for destinations is what is our value proposition and our measurement model. I know you're measured on gross value added, we're on direct expenditure, and if those big numbers of delegates aren't coming into your city, how do you then broaden your measurement model? Have you thought about that, or does the same still apply for you with GVA?
We're just about to move into a new 3-year strategy from next year. So these are all things that we're thinking about right now. We have done quite a lot of work around major events. So if you're looking at sporting and cultural events, we've been doing work around what's the broadcast reach and how that influence future travellers. So we have some really interesting and mind-boggling stats that have come out of that you know, the amount of Americans say that watch the NFL games in London on TV and how that influenced their propensity to travel to London in the future is just incredible, way bigger than I would have ever thought. So you host a Cricket World Cup, you get a big Indian viewership, and that does influence propensity to travel in the future. So not necessarily business events, but I think we can learn something from that.
I definitely agree.
we can increase our sectoral expertise and our attraction to other companies to bring their meetings off the back of the fact that something happened. But I think it's going to be really important for us to use our facilitation and convening abilities to get them the right speakers still, on a virtual stage, to still introduce them to potential partners. And I still think, a lot of the associations that are staying virtual or are going hybrid still want London in their name. They still want it to be the London, whatever, because that brings a certain kudos to their event. And I think Sydney will be the same. It's still, they want to be seen to be in tier 1 cities. And I think moving on from that, the delegates that do come, I think travel is going to change quite tremendously in the future. People are going to become smarter travelers. We're all waking up to carbon footprints now. Companies are much more aware of they don't want to increase their carbon footprint. So, and everything's going to be slightly more expensive because there will be, fewer airlines. There will be
very much so.
Just the cost of travel and doing, because of all the consolidation and the lack of product, I think, when we come out of this, will mean that it'll be more expensive, both in terms of the environment and in cost to travel. And I think people will think twice. So they'll become smarter travellers, and maybe they'll start to combine things, and this whole bleisure, sector will increase. So if they want to go to an event somewhere, they're going to want to go somewhere where they can multi-travel. Maybe they want to combine it with their general business meetings, bring their family for leisure, do their experiences, and they're going to want to go to big cities that have got a lot of content and a lot of opportunity to do that.
Oh.
I think there is still an opportunity for us to reposition ourselves slightly, fine-tune who we are, make sure that we are appealing to that potential multi-traveller, smarter traveller of the future, who are going to be the delegates at our events as well.
Yeah, and I love that optimism. I mean, that gives us hope, doesn't it? And I do agree with you. I think when we do get back to returning to a COVID normal or whatever that looks like, the opportunities will be different. The experiences will be very different as well. I love the broadcasting idea. I've been thinking that through, and, you used rugby or cricket. The Olympics is exactly the same in terms of what you broadcast and how that exposes your city. I mean, for meetings, it exposes our standing on the world stage as to beaming our content to a broader audience that would not normally be able to meet in person. And I think for many of these international associations are really broadening their memberships through that process. I think it is a bit of a different world as we move forward. And I think for destinations, it's really, thinking innovatively about the customer, the value that you can create and add. And then the complexity, as you know, Tracy, is, return on investment to your stakeholders, your tourism supply chain, your funders, your investors. There's a lot to think through, and the business plan, the 3-year plan, I think is out the window. I think we're going to rolling 3-month OKRs at the moment, because you just can't predict the future in this environment. It's so uncertain. Now, I'm cognizant that, we could talk for hours, but I've been told to keep this to 20 minutes. Tracy, your insights and your leadership is invaluable to our industry, and you are a great thought leader. And Sydney and London, we've always had this great relationship, and I look forward to continuing, obviously, and sharing our innovation. I think that's where we up the ante and we take the industry to the next level, and that's what we're here to do. So thanks for your time.
Okay, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, you too. Take care.